Hello and welcome. I'm Mike Nichols with PMOPA. Thank you so much for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this evening our guest, Tom Haines. Many of you know Tom. He has had a front row seat to over 3 decades of progress in general aviation and has some great stories to share with us. He's also engaged in a very important charitable organization, which he'll spotlight for us tonight. So let me do a brief introduction in case you're not familiar with Tom. He is a living legend in aviation and an award-winning journalist in aviation who spent nearly 30 years as the editor-in-chief and senior vice president of media at the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. He's an accomplished pilot and holds a commercial pilot certificate with multi-engine, instrument, and seaplane ratings, as well as several type ratings. And we won't hold this part against him, but he owns a Beechcraft A36 Bonanza. Under his leadership, AOPA's media properties achieved numerous prestigious awards, and Tom's writing has earned him awards from the Associated Press and the American Society of Business Publication Editors. And the Bahamian government named Tom as Travel Writer of the Year in 2010. And in 2023, he was inducted into the Living Legends of Aviation, which is an elite group of aviation and aerospace influencers. And also that year, he was awarded the Platinum Wing Award for Lifetime Achievement in Journalism by the National Business Aviation Association. Although he retired from AOPA in 2022 after 34 years, he is still actively involved in many aviation and public servant pursuits for AOPA, Redbird flight simulations, pilot workshops, and the South African nonprofit group Elephants, Rhinos, and People, which we'll learn a little bit more about tonight. So Tom, welcome, and thank you for joining us for this month's webinar.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. You're used to interviewing people. So this evening, let's put the shoe on the other foot. I'll start off in the opposite seat and interview you.
Okay.
And then following for that, I'd love for you to share us your passion for charitable flying, and then we'll go to a general Q&A where PMOPA's members can type their questions into the Q&A portal in Zoom, and at the end, we'll have time for answering their questions. So with that, let's jump into it. And kind of the first category I'd like to hear a little bit about is your career and your legacy. You've interviewed aviation legends, you've flown a wide range of aircraft, you've covered some of the biggest stories in the general aviation industry. Is there one assignment or article that you'll never forget?
Well, that's a great question. You're right. There have been so many, and I just feel so blessed to have had the opportunity to get the job that I did, and that led to so many aviation opportunities, from a kid from rural northwestern Pennsylvania to end up as editor-in-chief of the world's largest aviation magazine. It's just the pathway there was complete happenstance. I'd love to tell you it was some great plan I had when I was a journalism major, but it didn't work that way. But yeah, I mean, I've had some really amazing experiences, and it's really hard to come up with one. But I've gotten to fly all over the world, and all over the United States. I've flown GA airplanes in 48 states. I've somehow missed South Dakota, although I've been over it a bunch of times, and Hawaii. Been to all 50, but I need to get back to South Dakota and do a couple of landings and get over to Hawaii and go flying with somebody over there, I guess. And I've flown GA airplanes on 5 continents. So you're right. I've gotten to do a lot of amazing things, and there are a lot of great stories out there that I've gotten to participate in. There are a few obviously that stand out. I mean, one was, well, good. Adrian Eichhorn's a good friend of mine, and he's a Bonanza pilot who's flown. He's ex-airline pilot and ex-military. He carried the football nuclear codes for President Clinton. Worked at the White House. Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Corps of Engineers. Has an amazing career. But he's also quite an adventurer, and he's flown his Bonanza around the world. He's flown it over the North Pole, and that sort of thing. So when he was doing his around the world trip in 2016, I met him in Normandy, France. He flew across the Atlantic on his own. I met him in Normandy, France, and we spent a couple of days poking around the beaches and the American cemetery, and really having very thoughtful time, kind of experiencing Normandy and all that what happened there during D-Day. But then we flew together to Friedrichshafen, then to Greece, where he went to Thessaloniki, and that was across the Alps. Amazing, beautiful flight in his Bonanza. And then we went to Santorini for an overnight, and then down to Cairo. And we took a couple of days. We went to the pyramids, we rode camels, and that sort of thing. And then I got an airliner and came home, and he went the rest of the way around the world.
Jeez.
But anyhow, when you talk about flights, I mean, that was just because it was so fun to be with him. and to get to experience that part of the world in a general aviation airplane, it was just very memorable.
That's fantastic. Adrian's a really great guy. I don't know how many folks in our community in PMOPA have had an opportunity to meet him.
Right.
I've known him for a number of years. He's given presentations when I worked at NBA for the single pilot safety stand down and other
Right.
programs. Just really great guy. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to get him in front of our audience and tell his great story. So
Yeah, yeah, he's got lots of good stories.
yeah. So I thought you were gonna have a Meridian or a PA-46 story in there as well.
Well, I've got one of those too. Yeah, actually, I have flown a bunch of different of the Malibu, the Mirage, Meridian, M600. I haven't flown the Fury yet. That looks really awesome. But one of the times I got to fly a Meridian was really special in that Piper invited me down to um, get some training in one, and so I flew with Bill Inglis who at the time was running the Piper Training Center down in Vero Beach. Now, of course, his Legacy Flight Training. Many of your members, I'm sure, have flown with him and know of him.
Absolutely.
Very good instructor. And so we did some simulator time, and then he and I flew a Meridian for I don't know, a day and a half off and on. Did a bunch of approaches and that sort of thing. And then basically they hand me the keys and said, bring it back in like 3 weeks or something and make sure the tanks are full. And so I got to really experience. I mean, usually when we do those pilot reports, people read the pilot reports in the magazines and that sort of thing, and we have to sound like we know what we're doing. Um, but we really don't get to experience, spend a lot of time with those airplanes typically. So it was really special to get the opportunity to spend 3 weeks with such an amazing airplane. But I
Yeah.
will tell you, when I started up that Meridian on the ramp at Vero Beach, right outside the factory, um, that engine, for the first time, I was terribly intimidated. It was the first time I'd ever started a turbine engine by myself, solo in the airplane. First time I'd ever flown a turbine airplane solo. And so as I was starting the engine, the thought went through my mind that this engine that I'm about to start is worth about as much as my house. So don't screw it up. And because there was a bunch of people on the ramp at Piper watching. So anyhow, I did get to experience that flying a single engine turboprop by myself. All the other turbine airplanes I've flown always happen to have somebody with me.
Yeah.
So that was really special. I took the airplane to a bunch of different places. In fact, I mentioned flying in all or 48 states. One of the states I was missing, in fact, I think it was like the uh, 47th state, was North Dakota. And so one of the places I took the Meridian was from Frederick, Maryland, where we were based, out to University of North Dakota. And so I flew the Meridian out there and landed it. And so that was, memorable as well because it was one of the last states I got. In fact, I guess from a 50 state standpoint, it was the last state that I got to. It was the 50th state, but only the 47th GA state, I guess it was for me, something like that. So anyhow,
Yeah.
very memorable experience flying the Meridian. It was fun.
That's incredible. Yeah. Hopefully one day I'll get the keys for Meridian for a few weeks. So
Yeah, really. Somebody in your position, man, you ought to be able to get the keys. Just somebody ought to give you a left seat experience.
right, right. I shared with Tom in our prep call that I've never flown a PA-46. Hint, hint, PMOPA members. All right. So it sounds like everything went really well with the Meridian. Tell us about a flight that challenged you as a pilot and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, well, the one that jumps right to mind on that one was actually another single engine turboprop, in which case I picked up a TBM 700C, the first C model to come to the United States, which is the C model is the one that's got the first one with the pilot door up front and with the big cargo door in the back. And so I went to Tarbes, France, with a photographer, Mike Pfizer, who many of you may know, at least know his work because he's one of the best known aviation photographers in the world. And we took the airlines over, and next morning we were, after a very long day the day before, we got in the airplane. I was with a French pilot. I was in the left seat, experienced demo pilot from Sakata at the time, now Dower, was in the right seat, and we took off and flew up France to England or to Scotland, got fuel, went to Iceland, and then our next stop was Narsarsuaq, Greenland. And it was Saturday, and we ended up spending the night at Narsarsuaq. If you get the chance to expend a night at Narsarsuaq, I recommend that you don't take it. Um, it's not exactly, a very, not the highlight of most people's experience. It's, at the time at least, it was a concrete block hotel, and with pretty marginal food. But anyhow, um, we spent the night, and the next morning was a Sunday, and the airport's closed on Sunday. I guess it's a Greenland, Denmark kind of thing, where they just have no operations on Sunday. But that didn't stop our pilot, French guy, from saying, "Well, we're leaving anyhow." So we scaled the fence with photography gear and suitcases and everything else, and got into the airport, which is completely non-towered. And we took off. But before we took off, he kept saying how we need to get down the fjord. And if you know anything about Narsarsuaq, um, normally when you're coming in from, say, the States or Canada, for anywhere from the west, you typically fly up the fjord, and it's a beautiful. I'm told it's beautiful. And if you're coming in from Europe, like we were, you typically come over the ice cap, and then you could spiral down and land in the airport, which is, right at the end of the fjord. But when you're coming in up the fjord, you come up the fjord, and then you make a hard right turn and land. The runway is right there. And the French pilot who had done this trip a bunch of times, he's like, "Oh, you experience the fjord." So we were going to take off and fly down the fjord back out to the ocean. But the problem was it was really foggy. And I kept saying, I love to experience the fjord, but I'm really nervous about visibility in the fjord. And so why don't we just circle above the airport and get up over the tallest mountains and just go and forget the fjord? No, 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 no. He says, you must experience the fjord. Anyhow, okay, fine. He's the more experienced pilot. He's very persuasive. So I accept that. I'm in the left seat. He's in the right seat. We take off toward the fjord, and we make the left turn now off the end of the runway and start down the fjord, and it's full of fog. And I'm down over the water as low as I'm comfortable. And, in a single engine turbo TBM, we're flying pretty fast, right? Can't see really anything except the little bit of water ahead of me. He's over in the right seat, futzing with something and not really aware of kind of what the situation has become. And before we know it, I'm basically IMC in this fjord. And he get of his attention. He looks at me. His eyes, are huge, deer in the headlights, and I can see just kind of over his shoulder a bright spot. So I pivot the airplane around inside the fjord and just climb up out of there toward the bright spot. And pretty soon we're on top. We break out and we're on top, and it's a beautiful day up above the fog. We fly for about an hour without anybody saying a word. We were both very upset with ourselves. I was terribly upset with myself for allowing myself to be talked into that. I think he was either upset with me for not being a better pilot who was apparently comfortable flying, at wave top heights in an airplane that I didn't have that much time in at the time, or whether he was up with himself. We never really talked about it, and we should have, I suppose. But what I learned from that was to not be talked into circumstances that you're not comfortable with by another pilot just because you think the other pilot maybe is more experienced in the airplane or has more experience in general than you do. If you're uncomfortable with it, you have to speak up and you have to take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good lesson, and I'm thankful that you made it through, and hopefully you get back to see the fjord some other time when the
Yeah,
weather.
yeah.
So, 5 continents, 48 states. What is one hidden gem general aviation destination you think most pilots or all of PMOPA members should experience?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of beautiful places. I mean, I did a trip in Utah, southern Utah, down to the Green River. We landed. I was in a Kodiak, and we landed on a dirt strip down there, and it was just an incredible experience. But anywhere, I mean, I love the Southwest. There's so many beautiful places to see. It's such a great place to see from the air, and then you can land and go experience the same thing from the ground. So I love that. Um, but one place, if I could just wave a magic wand and give everybody the opportunity to go fly someplace in the world, it would be Southern Africa.
Wow.
It is, I've done it a couple of times in general aviation airplanes, and it's remarkable. I'll talk about it a little bit later when we get to the ERP part. But I truly believe, you know, it's just a great way to use a general aviation airplane. You can get around and do things that really in that part of the world where the road infrastructure is not very good, You can go experience things in a few days in a general aviation airplane, but there's just really no other means to do that. So again, we can talk about that a little bit later too.
Yeah, sounds spectacular. Right. Shifting gears, maybe a little bit away from your personal flying experience into the general aviation industry as a whole. What's your perspective on how the public accepts general aviation today versus when you started in this industry? And in your opinion, what can or should PMOPA members do to help advocate for general aviation in their communities? At AOPA, very strong advocacy organization. We support AOPA's efforts in advocacy, and think it's an opportunity for our members to learn kind of what you've seen behind the scenes and how we can be more effective.
Yeah. Well, of course, being a member of AOPA, EAA, NBAA, those organizations is really important. They do good work. They are very effective in Washington and in other areas. Um, when I started, when I learned, I soloed in at 16 and then got my pilot certificate just before I turned 18. So it took me a couple of years, slow learner. But right a few weeks before I graduated from high school. And then I didn't really do much with it in college because I had no money. And then I went to Professional Pilot Magazine after a little bit and then ended up AOPA. And it wasn't really until I got to AOPA in 1988 that I really got to flying general aviation airplanes and got, the instrument rating and then all the other ratings and got to use GA airplanes. But one thing that really feels different is that my sense is back in the 70s, in particular, even in the 60s to a certain extent, before airline travel was what it is today, before the deregulation of the airline industry in 1978, general aviation had a really important role in society, particularly in rural areas, the central part, mid part of the country, as a link in the transportation system to other parts of the United States. And that's still true today to a point, but it's not like it was in those days. And well, we all think airline tickets are expensive. They're not nearly as expensive as they ought to be from an inflationary standpoint compared to what they were before deregulation. And so one difference is that general aviation doesn't have the same role today that it does then. I mean, let's face it, most of what we do from a general aviation standpoint is for ourselves. We like the challenge of flying. We enjoy the experience. Some of us use it for business, but it's a very personal thing. We have a hard time really making a strong case for what general aviation does for society. I will say that out of one side of my mouth. Then I will also talk about humanitarian flying, public benefit flying. So there is a great deal that general aviation does do for society. But in the broader perspective of all that this country is and this huge country that we live in, from both a population standpoint, an economic standpoint, and a physical size, we general aviation really has a pretty small role there, and we need to keep that in mind because we're losing airports because of poor land use development and that sort of thing. And I too often I hear pilots say their reason for opposing their community is, well, we were here first. And that just doesn't fly. We just don't have that kind of clout. We have a lot of clout in Washington from a federal standpoint, but when it comes to local communities, it's really local pilots that have the clout. And even then, it's challenging to overcome the points of view of the homeowners and the businesses and that sort of thing that will want to gobble up all the property near the airport. So I kind of blame some of the communities for not doing a good job of land use development, for sure. But really, as pilots, we need to be active at the local level, educating the communities about the benefits of general aviation, about the benefits of their local airport. I'm vice chairman of the airport commission here at Frederick, Maryland, and we've got our airport management's great. We have two younger guys. One's the manager's a pilot. The assistant manager's a big enthusiast, and they've done a wonderful job of doing their best to get the community involved in the airport. And the biggest and most visible thing we've done is we started. This will be our third year of the Frederick Festival of Flight. Meet your airport is sort of the tagline, and it's not a fly-in. It's not for pilots. It's for the community to come out to the airport and get to see and touch and sit in general aviation airplanes, We have the state police helicopter that's based at Frederick. They're going to do a hoist demonstration this year. It's September 27th. Um, and we've got a medevac helicopter going to do some stuff. We've got two warbirds doing rides. We've got an array of general aviation airplanes, mostly from the tenants at Frederick, that'll be on display where people can come in and sit in airplanes. We've got a big kids zone. And that's just one thing that we as a community here at Frederick are doing to help educate the community. And I've reached out to all of the homeowner associations surrounding the airport and made sure that this is publicized in their newsletters to their communities so that they can bring families out. The last 2 years, first year we had over 9,000 people. When we were
Wow.
planning this thing, we thought, well, if we get 3,000 people, we'll call that a success. Well, we had over 9,000 actually. It was a beautiful day, so that helped. Last year we had about 4,500. The weather was bad in the morning, but still 4,500 people is pretty good. And a lot of it was families. It was amazing to see kids in strollers, and all these families coming out and kids getting excited about the airplanes. And so, I mean, those are small things, but they're all things that we can get involved in as individual pilots and really help promote general aviation at the local level. Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have is kind of at the grassroots level.
All right. I think that's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head there. And it's our responsibility to make sure that general aviation is thriving for generations to come. So you're a living legend. If I remember correctly, the Living Legends is presented in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills area. So let's talk about Hollywood. You've seen
Oh,
a lot of aviation themed movies, television shows. Which one gets it right, or at least which one or ones have entertained you the most?
oh wow. That's a great question. My wife hates watching aviation movies with me because, all I do is complain about, oh, I don't get that. That's not possible. You can't do that.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's some really fun ones out there. I mean, I love the Top Gun movies just because they're so exciting. And I really liked Maverick, the newer one, just because it's just fun to watch, even though, that crazy scene, where he's trying to climbing straight up out of basically a fjord, I guess, is just not possible. But it was still fun to watch. A couple of my favorite aviation films are by Brian Twilliger, who's happened to be a friend of mine, a filmmaker, who made 1-6 Right, which is, of course, about the legendary Van Nuys Airport and all the amazing people that pass through that community out there. And it's just a fun film. And so many, I know so many of the people that he interviewed, and sadly, many of them are gone now. That film's 20 years old. In fact, they're celebrating that at Oshkosh this year. But his other film is actually 10 years old, and they're both going to play Monday night at Oshkosh next week at the Ford Theater. 1-6 Right, and the other one, the newer one, is called Living in the Age of Airplanes. And
Yes.
even if you're not a GA pilot, it's an amazing film. National Geographic picked it up and it was shown in IMAX at a lot of museums across the country for a year or two when it first came out. But it's beautifully shot on all seven continents, and it tells the story basically of what the impact that the airplane has had on society. And we kind of take it all for granted, but Brian does a great story, tells a great story about all the things that wouldn't be possible today that we just take so for granted. The one scene I love is the one where I think it's in Nigeria. They're picking roses in a field, and all these roses then get bundled and sent to Amsterdam, and they're in this enormous warehouse, flown to Amsterdam. They're an enormous warehouse full of flowers, and in the morning, and then by the end of the day, the warehouse is empty because all those flowers have been shipped all over the world, and they arrive in different parts of the world still fresh. And you follow this one bouquet of flowers from the field of Nigeria to Amsterdam, all the way to somebody's counter or tabletop in remote Alaska somewhere. And it gets there in, about 3 days. And the flowers are still fresh and it looks really, really beautiful. And that's just one example of what you can do with an airplane that, would not have been conceivable, very many years ago, certainly 100 years ago. So anyhow, those are I think those two films by Brian are really interesting aviation films, and they don't drive me crazy.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. They're great, and I haven't watched either of them in quite a long time. So I have
Yeah,
the DVDs downstairs in my media room, so
right.
I need to put that on the list to rewatch sometime this summer.
Yeah.
Right, so last question before we get into your presentation is now that you've stepped back from the day-to-day media role at AOPA, what keeps your passion for aviation alive?
Yeah, well, I've really been fortunate to stay connected to aviation in a lot of ways. I still do some work for AOPA. I do some content creation for pilot workshops, pilot training organization. I'm on the board at Redbird Flight Simulation, so I get to stay connected, kind of on the manufacturing side through that. And I've been doing, a fair amount of charitable work, including for ERP, Elephants, Rhinos, and People, is an organization that I want to talk about in a few minutes in more depth about some of the things we're doing there to help protect the animals in southern Africa. So when I was working full time, I used airplanes all the time and got to go to a lot of places and use the airplanes for assignments. And it was wonderful. But I always felt a little bit guilty because I didn't really feel like I was ever had the chance to give back to the community much. So now in retirement, although I'm still plenty busy, I do have a little more time, and I have been able to do giving back. Like being on the airport commission at Frederick. I feel like I'm giving back there a little bit. To trying to outreach to the community, and doing some pilots and pause flights, and that's been very rewarding. And then this ERP project as well. It feels like I can maybe help out the planet a little bit by helping protect these animals.
Yeah, that's spectacular. Great. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been great to get to know you a little bit better and hear some of your stories. Why don't we hear a little bit more about the work you've been doing in charitable flying and what opportunities there are for PMOPA members to engage?
Yeah, 1 second. Let's go to share. All right. Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
Oops. 1 second. Oops.
We tested this before and it worked
We
perfect.
did. Oh, wait a minute.
There you go. It's coming on
There we
now.
go. All right. I was hitting the wrong share button.
Okay. All right. I'll go off camera while you present.
Okay. Yeah, so humanitarian flying is something I've really gotten passionate about since I retired. And one of the organizations that many of you may be familiar with is Air Care Alliance, and it is sort of the mothership of all sort of charitable flying organizations. AOPA was involved in helping to form it, as were several other organizations, and a bunch of public benefit groups got together, and it's probably been about 20 years ago now, to form Air Care Alliance. And Air Care Alliance is really meant to be sort of an overarching organization to help these smaller public benefit pilot organizations to be more effective and to help them out with some, sort of infrastructure kinds of things. And these organizations that they support, they do a lot of medical transport, disaster response, environmental missions, and that sort of thing. And ACA provides a lot of services to them, including among other things, sort of tracking some statistics. But I just want to share this one video that kind of, explains and gives you a sense of the importance of humanitarian flying.
One of the nurses made a comment to me a couple weeks ago, and the way she said it, I'd never heard anyone say it before. Heart transplant isn't something that lasts forever. He'll have another heart transplant. He may have 2 or 3 more heart transplants in his lifetime. It's a Band-Aid for hopefully better, longer quality of life than he had before. And appointments all the time. We were flying on Angel flights every other week back to Stanford.
So that's just one example of the amazing support that they provide. But they do a lot of medical transport, as I said, disaster response, environmental missions, and that sort of thing. And here's a look at their 2024 impact statement. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can get a sense of how much work happens by general aviation throughout the year by the organizations that are all members of Air Care Alliance. You know, all the animals transported, all the conservation organizations that are served by volunteer pilots, all the pilots involved, over almost 12,500 active volunteer pilots. So it's really significant what does happen with general aviation. I've gotten involved, as I mentioned earlier, with some humanitarian flying in the form of pilots and PAWs. I'd like to introduce you to up there on the left, we've got Douglas and Banjo, a couple of hounds that I've transported. We did some puppies on one of our flights, and then Big Leo on the right weighs over 100 pounds. Sweet thing. And that flight is interesting. I was by myself, and he wouldn't fit in the crate. So I folded the crate up and I put him in the back of my Bonanza, and I had a tether, and so I tethered him to the frame of the back seat, and to try to keep him from coming up front, because you know, 100-pound dog wanting to come sit on your lap when you're trying to fly is probably not a good thing. So he was sweet guy, and I kept elbowing him back into the seat to keep him in the back. But anyway, they're always fun. I had two of the flights I've done had puppies, 10 each, that were less than a day old. So they were with their moms in the crate. And again, very rewarding. And we mostly pick them up in the south, bring them up into the north. Oftentimes they come to Frederick. Somebody else will pick them up and take them the next leg on up into New York or New England. So it's just, you know, one of those important missions that these dogs probably would not survive if they're not given the chance to get to the north via general aviation airplanes. You know, because GA does really serve America, especially in times of need. And whether, you know, it's mudslides, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, who are the first ones to pick up the phone and try to participate? And it's GA pilots. When I was at AOPA, we had every time there was any kind of a disaster, the the call center would get all kinds of calls immediately from GA pilots wanting to help. And oftentimes we'll direct them to the other organizations that are already on the field or in the field, trying to coordinate supplies and that sort of thing. I got to participate a couple of different ways. One was Hurricane Irma when it came and really wiped out Key West and then parts of the Caribbean back in 2017. And there were several of us at AOPA that got in our airplanes and flew down to Florida, joined up with some of the organizations that were already in the ground to move supplies, particularly into Key West in the first few days, because the road there was blocked off and some of these people didn't really have much for several days, including no power and that sort of thing. So they were really suffering. And here's a look at what that trip was like.
We landed in Lakeland, where the Sun and Fun grounds became our base of operations. Aerobridge and Operation Airdrop were on scene, helping to match up the needs on the ground with the capabilities of volunteer pilots and aircraft. In Ocala, a semi full of medicine, water, and other supplies was waiting for us. First stop, Sugarloaf Key, where the local police officer said they really needed food. We had about 1,000 pounds of food and needed items and easily got our aircraft into the narrow private strip. Then over to Summerlin Key, another private strip.
Our first response that we dropped in right when we got here, people started kind of coming out of the woodwork like it wasn't a city in the United States. And
Peter Burwell flew his caravan down from Minnesota to help out.
there was a guy in a pickup driving on this road right here that was handing out water and food, and people were coming out, hey, do you have food? Do you have food? Do you have water? And then that's when it kind of hit that these people haven't had any of this stuff for the last few days, and really highlighted the need for general aviation to start moving supplies in here.
And AOPA's CJ-3 dispatched on a life-saving mission to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. In addition to the insulin, more than $300,000 worth of antibiotics. The return flight evacuated stranded U.S. citizens.
So humanitarian flying comes in many shapes and sizes. One of the more memorable experiences I got to fly regarding humanitarian flying was a couple of days with Orbis, the Flying Eye Hospital, which was an incredible airplane and a remarkable organization that flies around the world. And it is literally a flying hospital, one, very sophisticated, advanced surgical equipment inside. And there's an operating room, there's a recovery room, there's prep, there's a suite where people can sit and watch via cameras, closed circuit TV, and learn. So it's really a teaching hospital. And what we don't realize in the United States is how much they don't have in some parts of the world. I mean, the eye diseases that some of these kids in particular have in remote third world countries are easily cured with simple surgeries and with really pretty basic medications, but they just don't have it. And so these kids end up blind and a real burden on their families and on their communities because they can't do anything. And so they get ostracized in many cases for lack of really basic medical care. So Orbis comes in and does the surgeries and teaches the local doctors how to do it, and then continues to support them even after the airplane leaves. They leave behind the equipment, they leave behind staff to make sure that the local doctors really understand how to do these procedures. And when I was talking to the pilots and the support staff for the airplane, they told a great story about these two little girls that they saw at some remote village somewhere, who were blind just for cataracts. So it's unusual for kids to have cataracts, but it does happen. And both of these little girls were blind, but they played together, but they had never seen each other, and they had never seen their parents. And so they both came in at the same time to have these surgeries, and they got to see each other for the first time. And here's a little bit what that was like.
So then they come on the airplane, they do cataract surgery in both eyes the next day. They put them up in the laser room, they put them facing each other. Their father's there. They take off the patches, they see their father, they see their best friend. And it really changed their lives forever.
This Mammoth MD-10 is a life changer for the people who come to her and the people who fly with her.
Well, as a pilot, the most rewarding thing is getting to fly this one-of-a-kind airplane. As a volunteer, seeing someone regain their sight is just an unbelievable experience.
This is Orbis One, a fully self-contained flying eye hospital with one of the most advanced surgical suites available. Her mission? To bring first world eye care to developing countries. But more importantly,
we are actually a teaching facility. So instead of going in and doing multiple eye surgeries, we actually teach. We work with the local communities within these countries to bring ophthalmology and the teaching philosophy. So this airplane has a classroom in it. They can see live training, whether they're getting the hands-on training or not, just as if they were looking through the surgery themselves. We can data link that off to other locations. And now with the internet, we even can have somebody in a country that maybe we can't get to, and they can be watching us live on the internet, and they could even send us a text message to one of our surgeons that's doing a live surgery and actually be able to text the question and get an answer live over the internet.
Orbis One started life as a DC-10 airliner, then converted to a FedEx cargo hauler. FedEx upgraded it to an MD-10 and eventually donated it to Orbis. Orbis team designed palletized plug-and-play operating and recovery rooms for it that can be loaded through the massive cargo door.
So then they
So that's just a clip from one of our AOPA live segments about that trip. But you know, GA doesn't just serve America; it serves the world in remote parts of the world as well. As I alluded to earlier, one of my favorite places in the world to use general aviation airplanes is in Southern Africa. I've got a chance to do that a couple occasions. First time was with John and Martha King, actually. Many of you probably know John and Martha King. I literally have traveled in parts of the world with them, including parts of Africa where people come up to them, and everybody seems to know John and Martha King. Anyhow, my wife and I were in one 182, Cessna 182, and John and Martha were in the other, and we did a trip together and flew South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, and had an incredible experience. And it really changed me because we got to see the animals in a way that you don't get to see them any other way. It'll spoil you. You'll never want to go to a zoo again because once you've seen them in their natural environment like this, you'll just never want to see them in a zoo again. And GA airplanes are a great way to do it. They say that Africa, once you've been there, it sort of steals a piece of your heart and that you'll always want to go back again. And I did want to go back again. I wanted to see these animals again in their environment. And later, when I began thinking about humanitarian flying, I was thinking about ways that maybe I can help and that I can use a general aviation airplane to help protect these animals because so many of them are endangered and are really struggling. And so I was approached by an organization called ERP, Elephants, Rhinos, and People, about the time I was retiring from AOPA. Two of the principals of the nonprofit happened to be pilots and AOPA members, but they didn't have a lot of experience in aviation. They both were not real active pilots, and they didn't really feel like they had the expertise to figure out what are the airplanes that they need to support their mission. They already had established large tracts of land preserves in South Africa and Namibia, but the ones in Namibia in particular were far enough apart and large enough that they really needed some airplanes to be able to get around and to help support it. So they tapped me and asked me to help them. So I've been helping them, and I've really gotten surprised to learn, how big the need is. Here's a look at some really cute little animals, right? Some baby elephants and baby rhinos. Who doesn't like to look at that? And you think about them having this amazing life. They're out in the savannah and that sort of thing. But guess what? It's a tough life out there, and partly because of humans. So look at the little guy in the bottom right, the little baby rhino. He's as cute as can be, and it looks like he's having the time of his life, but not really. He's an orphan. He had to stand by and watch as his mother was slaughtered by poachers, and they were there for no reason other than to steal the horn off of her. So they killed her for the horn, and he was left an orphan. Fortunately, he got scooped up by an organization that protects orphan animals, and he'll someday get back out and be on his own again. But the reality is we're losing 2 rhinos a day and an elephant every 15 minutes or so by some reports. And so we're losing them because of the value that people place on them. And in some ways, it's such a silly value. The horn of the rhino in powder form is worth literally on a per ounce basis worth more than gold. Think about that for a minute. So you're in one of these communities around these preserves where these elephants and rhinos are, and you have the opportunity to become wealthy by just supporting somebody poaching a rhino and you getting a percentage of the take. Or for the elephants, it's the ivory from the tusk. So it's very challenging. We're losing these beautiful creatures at a rate that can't be sustained. And so ERP has focused not just on the animals and protecting the animals, but also helping the communities in rural Africa for the people to have better lives. They have programs where they teach entrepreneurial skills, they do business development, they give bicycles to the kids so they have an easier time getting to school so they can get a better education. They create markets to be able to absorb the products that people in these villages will make, and then ERP takes it out to larger markets and sells it in different parts of the world, and really just helping them have a better life so that they'll be more likely to want to protect the animals and to not support poaching, and to understand that if they protect the animals, then it leads to tourism, which also helps the local economy as well. So ERP has established 3 large properties in Namibia. Namibia, as you know, is just kind of in the southeast or southwest corner of Africa, right next to South Africa. And they've got 2 elephant corridors in the north and a black rhino sanctuary in the south. Now, the desert adapted animals or desert adapted elephants and the black rhinos in either case, their numbers are measured in the hundreds. Okay. There are not very many of them, and they need to be protected. They need organizations like ERP to step in and give them security. And ERP does a great job of that. I've been to one of their preserves in South Africa that they had just acquired. They'd already put up a bunch of fencing. They put in license plate readers, cameras surrounding the property. They train their own canine units. They train their own rangers. and they have and a lot of other very sophisticated security around all their properties, and they're implementing that in the Namibian properties now as well. And so the next stop is some airplanes. And so we're working to establish a small fleet of anti-poaching airplanes and herd monitoring airplanes to oversee these preserves and to give some protection to these animals. First up is an NX Cub. We're going to take delivery of our first airplane, an NX Cub from Cub Crafters, next Tuesday at AirVenture. And we're going to sign the documents at a press conference at 9:45. So if you're at the show, feel free to come by the Red Bird exhibit at Oshkosh and see this for yourself. The airplane will be there all week. I'll be around the airplane most of the week. Later, we hope to acquire some Cessna 182s for larger airplanes for other missions around, particularly Namibia. And so it's going to be a really exciting time. We're working really hard to make this happen. And the cool thing is that you can participate. Starting next year, we're going to be inviting U.S. certificated pilots. So we're going to leave the airplanes registered, which means anybody who's got a U.S. pilot certificate, whether you're from the United States or not, can come over to Namibia and get access to these airplanes easily. It'll be easy transition because they're going to stay registered. So your U.S. pilot certificate will be valid. You'll get a chance to visit the reserves and do some game viewing and see some of the amazing things like I just showed in the video a few minutes ago. Stay in these beautiful bush lodges, which are just remarkable. You would not believe how much luxury there can be out in the middle of nowhere. They do a great job with that. And then see some of the projects that ERP is working on. And you'll pay for this experience, the use of the airplane, and that will help fund the air wing, as we call it, the ERP air wing, on an ongoing basis. We have other means to support it, so we're not completely relying on that. But these airplanes we've made available, like we're thinking about, like on a quarterly basis, we'll arrange a trip for a handful of pilots to come over and get a chance to fly around Namibia and experience it. And just the scenery alone is incredible. I have flown there. I flew a 210 there in 2023, and got a chance to see the country from the air, and it's just a remarkable experience. And we're working hard to fund our second airplane with what we just launched a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to be kind of a theme at AirVenture next week. It's called our Signature Campaign, which is where we're inviting 500 pilots to each donate $1,000. We get 500 pilots to donate $1,000 each. We'll have enough money for our second airplane. And anybody who does that, we will be putting your signature on the side of the airplane as it's put to work in Namibia as sort of a flying tribute to you and your support of the organization. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'm happy to talk about it. Otherwise, we got a URL that's a little unwieldy, but if you're interested, that's one way you can get to it, or you can go to erp.org. And if you hunt around a little bit, you'll be able to find more but definitely about the ERP Air Wing and the work that's being done over there, but also about the Signature Campaign. So, Mike, that's kind of what I got to say about humanitarian flying and some of the cool experiences I've gotten to do, and it's just been really a lot of fun, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to y'all.
Yeah, Tom, thanks so much. And it's certainly very heartbreaking to hear about the poor animals. And I think it's a great opportunity for PMOPA members to give back like you've been doing. And the fact that we might even be able to fly down there would be just mind-blowing. And
Yeah, I mean, again, one way or the other, as I said earlier, if you get a chance to do it or make the chance to do it, because there are lots of people down there who will organize flying safaris for you. And it's definitely a life-changing experience to get to go there.
Yeah, it's really spectacular. So we have a couple of minutes left. I don't see any questions in the Q&A portal, so we'll just pause for a moment. If somebody would like to type a question in, we'll see if there are any questions. And if not, then we'll say goodnight. So we'll just pause for just a moment, Tom.
Okay.
I don't see anything yet. So what I'll do is offer to our PMOPA members watching the video, if you have questions that you didn't get answered tonight, feel free to send me an email directly, mnichols@pmopa.com, and I'll make sure that Tom gets the question. We'll get back to you with the answer to that. So Tom, thanks again. Really appreciate your time this evening. Great talking with you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, and appreciate the fantastic work you're doing in charitable flying and all of your contributions to the success of general aviation over your incredibly successful career at AOPA.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's been great knowing you through various parts of your career as well, and I've always enjoyed it. And it's great to talking to the PMOPA members. I look forward to seeing some of you at the show next week.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good night and safe travels to AirVenture. Take
Thanks.
care, everyone.
Bye.